Welcome to this explainer on unlocking your 12 intelligences, and ultimately, why you are absolutely not broken. If you've ever felt like you're just carrying this impossibly heavy mental weight, constantly exhausting yourself trying to fit into what society expects of you, I want you to know right up front, you are totally not alone in that. Okay, let's dive into this.
Why in the world do I struggle with things everyone else finds so unbelievably easy? Have you ever caught yourself asking that? It's just this horrible sinking feeling, isn't it? You look around and you see people just breezing through tasks that feel like literally climbing Mount Everest to you. Maybe it's doing mental math on the spot, or organizing a massive pile of messy documents, or just trying to navigate a crowded, noisy room without feeling completely drained of all your life force. We watch others do these things effortlessly, and our immediate default is to think, well, what is wrong with me? Am I broken? Am I lacking something? We take our natural tendencies, our own unique quirks, and we incorrectly label them as weaknesses or even outright failures. But as we're going to see in our source material today, this is a massive, massive misunderstanding of how human ability actually works.
So, the real root of all this misunderstanding is what we call the single ruler myth. Think back to your time in school. You were evaluated almost entirely on a very, very narrow set of metrics, primarily your language skills and your logical or numerical abilities. And hey, if you are highly developed in those two specific areas, congratulations, you were labeled smart and excellent. But here's the thing. Actual human ability isn't just one single line on a ruler, not even close. It is a vast, wide spectrum of totally distinct skills. There's that old saying, right? If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life believing it's stupid. Well, we do the exact same thing to ourselves when we buy into this myth.
And this brilliantly illustrates the need for a total paradigm shift. Enter the multiple intelligence theory. This was originally pioneered by the psychologist Howard Gardner, and it completely dismantles the old idea of just having a single, all-encompassing IQ score. Instead, this psychological framework proposes that human intelligence is actually divided into multiple distinct categories. Our source material today expands on this concept to identify 12 distinct types of intelligence. So we're talking about linguistic, logical, spatial, physical, musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal, naturalistic, and even existential thinking, among others. Suddenly, intelligence isn't just some boring test score you get in third grade. It's this vibrant, multifaceted spectrum.
Now, here is the absolute key concept you need to grasp. Combination. Intelligence is not a single trait that you either just have or don't have. It's a highly unique combination of all these different types. I want you to think of it kind of like a giant audio equalizer board in a recording studio. For some folks, the sliders for math and spatial awareness are just cranked all the way up to the top. But for others, the linguistic and intrapersonal sliders are the ones dominating their mix. Every single person's pie is just sliced differently. So those areas where you feel like you're constantly struggling, that simply means those specific intelligences just have a lighter weighting in your unique combination. And guess what? It is perfectly normal to have lighter areas. Literally everyone does.
Let's actually look at how this plays out in real life by reframing a super common misconception. Society often looks at someone who prefers to be alone or someone who maybe shrinks away from huge, loud parties and immediately labels them as antisocial or isolated. It's treated as a traditional flaw. But if we apply our new framework, that preference for solitude or those quiet, one-on-one chats, that doesn't mean you lack social skills at all. In fact, it often means your linguistic and intrapersonal intelligences, which is your ability to look inward and connect profoundly with just one other human being, are heavily weighted. It's not a lack of sociability. It is a powerful capacity for deep, focused connection. See, you aren't broken. You're just optimized for an entirely different kind of interaction.
Once you truly understand that you are just a different combination on that equalizer board, you realize this incredibly liberating truth. You do not need to be good at everything. It is completely 100% fine if your spatial intelligence, things like reading maps or visualizing complex geometry, or your numerical intelligence has a slower development. You do not need to force it. Instead, you can just outsource those weak spots. You can use tools, rely on new technology, or partner up with others whose equalizer boards naturally spike in those areas. By finally letting go of this exhausting need to be perfect at literally everything, you free up massive amounts of time and energy to focus on what you actually do best.
Which naturally brings us to a really fascinating question. Are these distinct intelligence traits born or made? Like, is our equalizer board totally permanently set at birth, or do we slide those faders up and down as we grow? The source material dives deep into this classic nature versus nurture debate, referencing some incredible studies, particularly twin studies, that reveal intelligence and personality absolutely have a genetic foundation.
Things like your baseline sensitivity to sound, your foundational logical tendencies, or your basic introversion or extroversion. Those are deeply rooted in your biology. But that is only half the story.
Now, what's really interesting about all this is how genetics provide the foundation, sure, but your environment actually shapes the final outcome. So let's say someone is born with a genetic trait for high sensitivity. If they grow up in a highly musical environment, they might become an incredibly talented musician. But take that exact same genetic trait of high sensitivity and place it in a completely different environment, that person might become a deeply empathetic writer or a brilliant counselor. The raw material is exactly the same, but the environment builds a completely different house out of it.
And this is exactly why talent changes shape. The source gives a great example looking at siblings. You can have two siblings who share the exact same baseline genetic traits, say a really strong logical capacity inherited from their parents. But because of their unique experiences, their specific interests, and the different people they meet, one sibling might channel that logic into becoming a top-tier software engineer, while the other channels the exact same logical foundation into becoming an amazing strategic event planner. The foundation is inherited, for sure, but how it actually manifests in the real world, that is entirely shaped by the environment it grows in.
So if our strengths are this beautifully unique combination of genetics and environment, why in the world do we spend so much time obsessing over trying to fix our weaknesses? Doing so carries some really severe hidden costs. Think about it. When you force yourself to overcome a natural weakness, like trying to shove an equalizer slider up when it's naturally heavy and wants to sit low, it is a massive, massive drain on your daily energy. It increases your mental and physical burden tremendously. And worst of all, it depletes the exact energy you desperately need to exercise your true strengths. If you spend all day forcing yourself to do something you just aren't naturally wired for, you will eventually, inevitably, hit burnout. It is exhausting, it's counterproductive, and it is seriously detrimental to your overall well-being. I want you to really internalize this next point, almost like a piece of advice from a wise mentor. A mismatch between your environment and your intelligence combination is not a personal failure, period. If you are struggling at work or in school, it is not because you lack ability, and it is certainly not because you are a failure. It is simply a mismatch. It's like you're trying to use a map to measure the temperature, right? It just doesn't work. You need to stop focusing on your weaknesses and start leaning heavily into your natural access. Because when you finally align your environment with your natural intelligence combination, all that daily friction just disappears. Let's move to and see how this builds into something we can actually use. Because the obvious next question is, well, how do we actually do this? How do we find out what our own unique pie chart looks like in the real world? Thankfully, you don't need some massive, ridiculously expensive psychological evaluation to start figuring this out. The clues are already scattered all throughout your everyday life, just waiting for you to notice them.
It basically comes down to a really simple process of observation. First, just notice where your mind naturally wanders when you're completely alone and no one is watching you. What are you drawn to? Next, pay close attention to what activities actually recharge your batteries. What makes you feel energized and alive rather than totally drained? Then, step 3. Actually write these micro-habits down in a notebook. See, finding your strengths isn't about sitting around waiting for this sudden magical epiphany to strike you like lightning. It's just about quietly observing your daily micro-habits and giving them a concrete outline by putting pen to paper. And finally, step 4. Apply these insights to your daily choices. Just make tiny tweaks to how you work, how you relax, and how you interact with others so that you're always favoring your natural intelligences.
As we start to wrap up this explainer, I really want you to hold on to this one core concept. The 12 intelligence types we've been discussing today, they are not just some new ruler to measure yourself against to see if you fall short. Absolutely not. They are a compass, they are a tool for deep, profound self-understanding. Recognizing your own internal power, your very own unique combination of intelligences allows you to finally stop fighting against the current. It makes your daily life lighter, it makes it easier, and honestly, so much more fulfilling. You finally stop apologizing for what you aren't, and you start optimizing for what you actually are.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly crucial question to think about. What if the specific trait you've been apologizing for your entire life, your quietness, your obsession with tiny details, or maybe your constant need to move around, what if that is actually your greatest untapped strength, just waiting for the exact right environment to flourish? Really think about that. Take a good, honest look at your own equalizer board today, and please stop apologizing for how your sliders are set. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I truly hope this gives you a powerful new lens through which to view your own incredible potential.